When an airplane loses oxygen, we're supposed to put our own masks on first and then worry about other people. What if life is like that? What if we're supposed to worry about ourselves first? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions in human history. I got another interesting dilemma for you. This is something that I like to give in my philosophy classes. It's called the plank of Carneades, after a philosopher that gave it named Carneades. Shocker, right? And here's what assume you are on a ship called Titanic 2, let's say. And I want to put you in like a warm water scenario so we don't have to worry about freezing. But let's say there's an explosion on the ship or something, right? And stuff goes everywhere. You are launched away from the ship along with a person that is, for the purposes of our scenario, is your doppelganger, right? Same age, same gender, whatever, anything like that, right? This is pretty much the same, looks kind of the same and everything. Also, same number of family members, right? That kind of stuff. And let's say between the two of you, a plank lands, right? Nice and buoyant, just buoyant enough actually, because you both get over there and you settle onto it and you both sink, right? You let go, one of you gets on, and you float just enough to where you could survive. Okay, so you decide, okay, well, let's trade off, right? You go first, then I'll go, and so that's what you start to do. And then, it's your turn to tread water, and after a while, you start to get exhausted, and you start to realize, and you sort of just blurt out, just thinking out loud, I don't think we're both gonna make it. Someone's gonna drown. And your alternate self looks at you and says, "Oh, wow. Well, then I'm not going to get off of this thing." Right? What would you do? Would you try to fight that person off, take the plank, and survive, effectively killing the person, or would you allow the person to take the plank and continue to try to tread water and eventually drown? Right? Let's say somehow you knew that help was coming too, like in a couple of days or something, so that you knew that whoever was on that plank was going to survive, but someone for sure was going to die. What would you do? Some possible solutions I've heard from some of my students have been, well, I could go on to cure cancer one day if I allow this person to go drown. Then that maybe that's a good thing, because I could do more good. But remember, this is your doppelganger, right? So let's say you guys have about equal 50-50 shot here, you versus that person, for doing the same amount, same thing. So that person has the same chances of curing cancer. You might say, I have duties to my family, right? Because I have brother and sisters at home. Be very sad if I die. This person has the same thing. Maybe you have obligations to your family that individually override theirs, from your perspective. So let's say instead that you guys both have no family right now. Let's say instead that, for some reason you guys don't know, parents or anything like that. So it's all about equal. What would you do? On this view that we're going to talk about today, ethical egoism, the idea is that you are supposed to always choose with whatever is in your best interest, right? So in this case, in the plank of Carneades, the ethical egoism would dictate that you kill the person, that you push them off. I mean, I could even go further and say, like, let's say somehow a waterproof floaty gun just comes into your hand and you could shoot the person. That would be directly killing the person, and that might feel like, well, it's not as comfortable. But so that's why I like the idea of the pushing off of the person instead, because it's not direct murder. It may feel like it gives it a little bit more of a dilemma. I don't know, and you might not think so, but then that's totally fine. But yeah, that's what ethical egoism would step in and say. You you make the choice that most benefits you. In this case, what most benefits you is your survival. You might hear that idea, ethical egoism, and think, wow, that sure sounds like anti-ethics, right? Like the whole point of having ethics is to, be able to obviate some things that we would normally do if we were just thinking about ourselves. So, for example, I might steal people's cars if I were an ethical egoist, right? Because stealing those cars would benefit me the most. Not quite. The ethical egoists have a very interesting response to that called the cooperation argument. And it goes like so. It is usually in our best interest to cooperate with each other. If I were to go around stealing cars, then other people would mistrust me or something like that. I would be creating a society that wasn't very good, So it is actually in your best interest to do most things that we would typically consider ethical. So the cooperation argument takes care of a lot of, and in fact, there's good evidence to this. There was I went to a talk by a guy, I can't remember, his name is Gatchner or something like that. This book is The Power Paradox. I think he's out of Stanford. Anyway, I'll put a link in the description. I'll research it for you. And they showed that when through doing social experiments, that people who are more cooperative, who are more willing to work with others, who are act what we normally think is moral, they actually get ahead much quicker than other people because people trust them and people want to work with them because they can cooperate. They can advance in the workplace and stuff like that. So it's actually in your best interest to do most of these things. Great response, right? I'm worried about my own best interest, and my best interest actually happens to take care of all of the ethics that we normally want. So that's their response to that, and they actually have an argument for themselves as well, which is that ethics should be practical, right? Imagine I gave you, self-driving cars are it sure seems like they're going to happen. Like they're going to be. I think they're probably going to be required at some point. I know the DOT said they wanted. They had a goal of 0 deaths in by 2030, which I mean, there's 0 chance that you can have 0 deaths with human operators. So I'm guessing that's what. Maybe they even said that. I don't know. But so let's say we're manufacturing self-driving cars, and I'm programming them, and I'm thinking about all the different scenarios that you can come into, and imagine the following scenario: you're driving on a 1-lane bridge over like a 1,000-mile chasm, and it's also got a sidewalk with pedestrians, and there's a hole in the middle of the bridge. Let's say a hole just drops down, and so if this self-driving car were to continue, if it tried to brake, it wouldn't. There wasn't enough space for it to brake. The only way that you could avoid the hole is to drive into the pedestrians and the sidewalk. Now that sure sounds immoral, but imagine selling somebody a car when they knew it was going to kill them. If it was between you and another person, your car's going to kill you, right? Can we really expect people to buy cars like that? Maybe you think we can. I'm not saying. This is the argument, right? So the argument goes, it's impractical to have any other kind of motivation aside from self-interest. Therefore, ethical egoism is really the only system of ethics that makes sense. A possible response to that is that it might not be the case that moral theories need to be practical. And I know that sounds weird, like an system of ethics that we can't use. Not quite, but a lot of times for example, a lot of times we act irrationally. A lot of times, we can make choices that don't make a whole lot of sense. I might well, I might be racist, totally, totally irrationally, right? I might think I'm going to say this because I'm Latino, right? All Latino people, oh man, they are always pickpockets, right? They're always stealing. And I have no real good reason to believe that. Actually, I have an even better one. I had, when I was at the academy, we had a cadet from, some country in Africa. Oh, dang, I can't remember what it was. But here's what I thought. He was such a nice guy, right? Like one of the friendliest guys that I've ever met. And I remember thinking, gosh, people from that country must be so friendly, right? I met one guy, right? Totally irrational, right? I met one guy, and I think everybody from that country must be like the friendliest people ever. And you can imagine like doing the reverse. What if he was a jerk? And I think, man, people from that country must be jerks. And then I can make decisions based on that, right? So that's an irrational choice. A system of ethics shouldn't say something like, yeah, so you should never trust people from that country just because I'm irrational, right? It should appeal to an ideal rational self. And if I were that rational, I would trust these people. Therefore, I should trust these people, not appeal to my irrational self. So yeah, it doesn't. I know it sounds weird to say that a system of ethics doesn't need to be practical, but that's not quite what I don't mean. Is that we should not be able to use it. I mean, it may not be directed towards us as we are now, but directed as some ideal selves or something like that. There are a few objections to this theory. First of all, that the response I gave you earlier to that one objection, that it seems like you'd have a lot of immoral things that you would end up doing. I talked about the power paradox, that book, right? And again, link in the description. So I asked, when I was in that talk, I asked that guy, like, why, if everybody would benefit from cooperation, then why isn't this some kind of, utopian society, right? Like, why do we have people that are jerks? And he told me, and this was their part of their research too, which was fascinating, right? He told me, once you get up to a level of power, like once you've actually succeeded, then you no longer people tend to no longer cooperate. In other words, power tends to corrupt, just like the intuition goes. So, for example, this was a really cool experiment. This guy, he was very interesting guy, very interesting studies that he came up with. They were about to, they were doing like some study, like they would get people from a corporation or from a business and sit them all around a table, and they would be giving them like a written test or something like that. They thought that was the test, and they put in the middle of the test a plate full of cookies, and there were just enough cookies for everybody to have one plus one extra cookie, right? Not plus one extra cookie per person, but there was just only one extra cookie aside from all those. And they wanted to see, who would take it. Because if you've ever had, there's that phenomenon, last slice of pizza, right? And everybody's like, no, I'm so fond of you, right? Do you want to split it? Right? And who wants to split a slice of pizza? So, it was invariably the guy that was in charge, the boss, invariably took that extra cookie without asking, and they said not only that, but he would eat it just like an animal, like crumbs falling all over the place, mouth open. You know what I'm saying? Like just didn't care what anybody thought about him. So yeah, it seems like this theory would work up until a point, and that point is where people actually come in power. Right, and those are the people we're worried about. We want those people to act ethically of all people, right? So yeah, there's a unfortunate objection. Another objection. It seems like it's giving us, even if it gives us the right answers, even if this theory gives us what we typically think is moral, it seems like it's doing it for the wrong reasons, right? When I tell somebody what they're doing is wrong, I typically don't mean that it's wrong because it's not in their best benefit. So, for example, let's say you're just a sadistic person and you kidnap somebody, right? Let's say you don't kidnap. You say you're in the middle of the desert and there's no chance that anybody sees you or this other wandering stranger. The stranger is breaks a leg, right? Can't run away. Breaks both legs, and you as a sadistic person have the opportunity to finally, like the movie Saw. I've never seen the movie Saw, actually. Never saw it. Oh, that's awful. Sorry. Um, but yeah, like that, like let's say you're one of those guys, those weird guys, and this theory would say, in order to benefit yourself, yeah, go ahead, right? You should do that. But um, you might respond that you shouldn't do it because you would feel guilty, right? I know there are psychotic people that don't feel guilty, but let's say that was the response. I, as an ethical person, or let's say as an ethicist, I wouldn't say that it's wrong because you're going to feel guilty about it. I'd say it's wrong because you shouldn't torture people, right? It seems weird to say like it's wrong because you're going to feel a little, no, I mean, the wrong thing about it is somebody's going to suffer, even though it's not you. So it seems like it might, even if it does give us the right answers, it's not giving us the right answers for the right reasons. Anyway, that is all we have for this this topic. Don't forget, though, the Philosopher's Classroom. I'm going the other channel that I have. I'm going to have arguments and objections that I'm going to go through just as if it were an academic classroom. So if you're interested in getting into this some more, or if you're like a philosophy student, definitely check that out and subscribe to that. And subscribe to this channel too, please. Especially if you feel like you're getting some benefit from this. If the ideas are interesting, or just you think that you're expanding your worldview, which I hope you are. Subscribing would definitely help. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and all that stuff. And like I always say, the best philosophy happens in dialogue. So let me know what you think about this. But also, an additional question: what do you think about people who give and give and give, until they're totally exhausted? Do you think maybe ethical egoism has something here, right? Maybe they say, well, look, those people are going to expend themselves. You should be worried about yourself first. Is that a support for ethical egoism, or is there some kind of response that other people could give? I don't know. Let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you later. Adios.